The desert heat still clung to asphalt at 7 in the evening, turning Route 66 into a ribbon of shimmer that bent the horizon into something liquid and uncertain. Clara Martinez stood behind the counter of Dusty's diner, wiping down surfaces that had been cleaned for the past hour, her feet aching in sneakers that should have been replaced 6 months ago. The dinner rush had ended around 6, leaving only a handful of customers scattered among red vinyl booths that had witnessed decades of travelers passing through on their way to somewhere else. She checked her phone for the third time in 10 minutes, thumb hovering over the banking app she had opened and closed repeatedly throughout her shift. The number remained unchanged no matter how many times she looked, $3,847. 5 years of double shifts and skipped meals and saying no to every invitation that cost more than free, and she was still $41,153 short of the nursing school tuition due in 8 months. The University of New Mexico program had raised their fees again. $45,000 for the first year alone, not counting books or living expenses or the 1,000 other costs that would emerge once classes started. The math was simple and brutal and completely unsolvable through any method Clara had been able to imagine. Her manager Dusty called from the kitchen, his voice carrying the particular wariness of a man who had been running a diner for 40 years and understood exactly how little anything changed. "You can head out early if you want." Dead tonight. Clara considered it for maybe 3 seconds before shaking her head. Every hour mattered. Every dollar counted. "I'm good. Might as well stay until close." As she poured herself a coffee from a pot that had been sitting too long, the bitterness suiting her mood, and settled onto a stool near the register. Through the window, New Mexico stretched in all directions with that particular emptiness that people either loved or fled from, depending on whether they found the space liberating or suffocating. Clara had been born here, raised here, and had intended to leave here until circumstances transformed intention into impossibility. 5 years ago, her father, Marco Martinez, had been killed outside a warehouse in Albuquerque. Wrong place, wrong time, caught between two motorcycle clubs whose territorial dispute had escalated from words to knives to gunfire in the span of maybe 90 seconds. Clara had been 18 riding with him to pick up restaurant supplies for the diner where he worked as a cook. She had seen the motorcycles pull up, had seen the patches on their vests, had heard her father tell her to stay in the truck. Then the shouting started, then the violence. Then the world split into before and after with such finality that Clara sometimes wondered if she had died that day too, and was just going through the motions of existence without actually living. The police called it gang violence, arrested 6 men from 2 different clubs, told Clara and her mother Rosa that justice would be served. 3 of the 6 served 18 months. The other 3 walked free when witnesses recanted testimony after receiving threats that everyone knew were real, but nobody could prove. Marco Martinez became a statistic, a name in a database, a cautionary tale about staying away from dangerous people and dangerous places. Rosa had moved back to Texas 6 months later, unable to exist in a city that held her husband's ghost in every street corner and familiar building. She had begged Clara to come with her, to start over somewhere new to escape the memories. But Clara had 1 semester left at community college and a stubborn belief that leaving would be admitting defeat, admitting that the men who killed her father had won completely. So she stayed, finished her associate degree, got a job at Dusty's, saved every penny she could toward the nursing school dream that was supposed to have started 2 years ago, but kept getting delayed by circumstances and insufficient funds. She thought about her cousin Sophie every time the nursing school dream felt impossible. 12 years old now, living in Santa Fe with Clara's Aunt Teresa. Sophie had cerebral palsy, her body rigid and uncooperative in ways that made simple tasks monumental efforts. But Sophie's mind was sharp and her personality was bright, and Clara had spent countless hours caring for her, learning how to feed her carefully and communicate without words and see past the disability to the person underneath. Those hours had shown Clara what she wanted to do with her life. Pediatric nursing. Working with kids like Sophie, who deserved caregivers who actually gave a damn, who saw them as children first and medical challenges second. The rumble of motorcycles cut through Clara's thoughts like a blade through silk. She looked up from her coffee, her entire body going rigid with a fear that was cellular, embedded in nerve endings that remembered trauma, even when her conscious mind tried to reason past it. Through the window, she counted 6 motorcycles pulling into the gravel parking lot, their chrome catching the last rays of sunset and throwing back light that looked almost aggressive in its brightness. Her hands started shaking before she could stop them. The coffee mug rattled against the counter as she set it down. Every instinct screamed at her to go to the back, to hide in the kitchen, to avoid any contact with the men climbing off those bikes. But she was the only server on duty. Dusty would emerge from the kitchen if customers needed service, but he paid her to do this job and she needed every hour she could get. The lead rider dismounted first a mountain of a man who had to be 6'4" and solid muscle beneath a leather vest covered in patches. His beard was gray and reached halfway down his chest. His arms were sleeved in tattoos that told stories Clara could not read, but understood instinctively as markers of a life lived outside the boundaries most people respected. The vest bore patches that identified him as a member of the Iron Kings Motorcycle Club, and the top rocker identified him as president. 4 other men followed, each one large and intimidating in the particular way that men who had survived violence carried themselves. Aware, ready, dangerous. The 6th biker, a lean man with quiet intensity written into every line of his posture, moved to the back of one of the motorcycles and began unstrapping a wheelchair. Not a standard wheelchair, but something specialized with cushions and supports and medical equipment that suggested serious disability. Clara's professional training kicked in before fear could override it completely, her eyes cataloging the chair's features even as her hands continued to shake. She grabbed a stack of menus and forced herself to walk toward the door, her father's voice echoing through her mind with the particular clarity of memory that felt like haunting. Mija, respect is earned by giving it first. Treat everyone like they deserve kindness until they prove otherwise. He had taught her that, had lived it, and it had maybe gotten him killed. But Clara could not bring herself to believe the lesson was wrong, even when the consequences were devastating. The bells above the door chimed as the group entered. The lead man, his vest reading Axe above the president patch, held the door open with surprising gentleness for someone his size. Behind him, the quiet biker carefully wheeled in the specialized chair. Clara's professional smile faltered for just a moment when she saw the occupant, a little girl. She could not have been more than 7 years old, with dark curls that framed a delicate face and bright hazel eyes that looked alert and intelligent, despite her body's obvious limitations. Her frame was rigid in the chair, hands curled inward, head tilted to one side in a position Clara recognized immediately. Cerebral palsy, the same conditions Sophie had, the same challenges, the same daily struggles, the same need for patient and knowledgeable care. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt years of waitress training overriding paralytic fear. Evening, welcome to Dusty's. Right this way. Axe's expression was hard-weathered by sun and time and experiences Clara could only guess at, but something in it softened slightly as he nodded. Need a table that'll fit the wheelchair. Clara led them to a large corner booth, quickly removing a chair to make space. Will this work? The bikers settled around the table with practiced ease, leather creaking their massive frames, somehow arranging themselves protectively around the little girl. Clara distributed menus, her eyes drawn back to the child whose bright gaze tracked every movement with obvious comprehension. Her voice was warmer now, genuine rather than performative. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" Axe answered before anyone else could, his voice rough as gravel, but carrying a tenderness that surprised Clara. "This is my daughter, Lily. She can understand everything you say, but she can't talk back." Clara crouched down to Lily's level, making eye contact with the girl whose hazel eyes were so alive and aware, it hurt to look at them and know that her body would not cooperate with what her mind wanted. "It's nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Clara. Do you know what you'd like to eat tonight?" Lily's eyes moved toward her father with the complex communication Clara had learned to read from Sophie. A specific look that asked a question without words, that conveyed preference and need through nothing more than noise and subtle expression. Axe's massive hand rested gently on his daughter's wheelchair. "She'll have the chicken tenders and mashed potatoes, cut up real small, and a chocolate milkshake." Clara smiled at Lily with genuine warmth. "You got it, and for you, gentlemen." As she took their orders, burgers and steaks, and enough fries to feed a small army, Clara could not help but notice the dynamic. These rough men covered in leather and ink and carrying themselves with the particular confidence of people who had done violence and survived it were completely devoted to this little girl. They joked with each other, voices loud and profane, but their eyes constantly flicked to Lily, checking on her, making sure she was comfortable, adjusting their volume when it got too loud. The biker, called Viper, bald and intense with scars that suggested a hard life, leaned forward to adjust Lily's head position slightly. That better, princess. Another one, older, with a gray ponytail threaded through with remaining streaks of red, watched Clara with assessment that made her nervous. You're good with kids. Clara's response was automatic. I have a cousin with cerebral palsy. I know the drill. Something passed between the bikers, a look that Clara could not quite interpret, but that seemed to hold significance beyond her understanding. The leader, Axe, studied her with new interest, his weathered face showing surprise that verged on wonder. His voice carried weight when he spoke. Most people see the wheelchair first. You saw my daughter. Clara did not know how to respond to that, so she just nodded and retreated to the kitchen to put in their order. Her hands were still shaking, but for different reasons now. These men terrified her. Their patches, their size, their obvious capacity for violence. All of it triggered memories of her father bleeding out on pavement while engines roared and men shouted and Clara screamed for help that arrived too late. But they also clearly loved this little girl with a devotion that was impossible to fake. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. Dusty looked up from the grill, his expression knowing. Those are Iron Kings. You okay out there? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She poured water for their table, added it to the tray with sweet tea and beer they had ordered, and carried it back out. When she arrived at their booth, she found Axe carefully adjusting Lily's position in her chair, his massive hands surprisingly gentle. The other bikers had pushed their own drinks aside to make sure Lily's chocolate milkshake, when it arrived, would be within easy reach. Clara set down their beverages with hands that had mostly stopped shaking. Food will be up in about 15 minutes. Axe met her eyes, and Clara saw something in his gaze that made her chest tight. Exhaustion, maybe. Or the weight of carrying the world on shoulders built for it, but tired nonetheless. Appreciate it. She returned to the counter, but her attention kept drifting back to the corner booth. She watched as Axe carefully held the milkshake while Lily drank through a straw, his massive hand completely steady despite obvious fatigue. She saw how the other bikers adjusted their volume and their laughter, making sure never to startle the little girl. She noticed the specialized bib that Axe tied around his daughter's neck with the practice of someone who had done it 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more without complaint. Their conversation drifted to her in fragments. The one called Chains, middle-aged with a solid build and kind eyes behind his beard, shook his head at something Axe said. Been on the road 3 days straight. Man, you got to sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. Axe's response was pure stubbornness. I'm fine. The youngest-looking biker, maybe early 30s with nervous energy that never quite settled, leaned forward with obvious concern. You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground. When's the last time you had a hot meal that wasn't truck stop food? Axe's tone suggested the conversation was over. I eat. But Clara had seen that exhaustion before. In her Aunt Teresa's eyes when Sophie had a bad week. In her own mother's face after Clara's father died, and Rosa had to work double shifts to keep them afloat. The bone-deep weariness of a caregiver who never stopped, never rested, never asked for help, because asking felt like admitting defeat. The food came up, and Clara loaded her tray. As she approached the table, logistics became immediately apparent. Axe was trying to manage his own meal while preparing to feed his daughter, and the problem was obvious. He would have to eat cold food, or to let Lily wait while his food got cold, or try to juggle both, and end up doing neither well. Clara had seen her aunt face the same impossible choice countless times. Her voice came out quiet, hesitant, the offer made before fear could override compassion. Would you like me to help feed Lily while you eat? I have a cousin with CP. I know the drill. Small bites, watch for swallowing, take it slow. Axe looked up at her with surprise so evident it transformed his entire face. For a moment, Clara thought he might refuse that pride or protectiveness or simple habit would make him say no. But then Lily made a small sound, her eyes moving between Clara and her father, and something in Axe's expression cracked open. His voice came out rough when he finally answered. You sure it takes a while? You got other tables. Clara glanced around the diner, old Fred still nursing his coffee in the corner booth, a young couple absorbed in each other near the window, an elderly woman working on a crossword puzzle that would keep her occupied for another 20 minutes at least. The rush was over, the evening was quiet, and this exhausted father needed someone to help him. Her response was firm despite the fear still singing through her nervous system. I've got time. Besides, Lily and I are going to be friends, aren't we? Lily's eyes brightened in a way that needed no words to interpret. Axe nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin that somehow conveyed more gratitude than 1,000 words could have managed. Clara pulled up a chair between Axe and Lily, positioning herself carefully. She picked up the fork and cut a small piece of chicken tender, making sure it was manageable size. Her voice stayed gentle, conversational, treating Lily like any other child rather than a medical challenge. Okay, Lily, here comes the first bite. You ready? Lily's mouth opened slightly, and Clara carefully placed the food inside, watching as the girl chewed slowly. It was a process that could not be rushed, that required attention and patience and genuine care. Each bite took time. Each swallow needed to be monitored. But Clara had done this hundreds of times, with Sophie knew the rhythm and the requirements, understood that this was not a chore but an act of connection. She kept up a gentle stream of conversation, talking about the desert sunset visible through the window, about a roadrunner she had seen that morning, about anything and everything that might make this little girl feel normal and seen and valued. Beside her, she heard Axe pick up his own fork, heard him take his first bite of hot food that he could actually taste instead of wolfing down cold while focused on his daughter. Heard the quiet conversation of his brothers resume, some of the tension easing from the table. Clara murmured encouragement after a successful swallow. Good job, Lily. You're doing great. Ready for some mashed potatoes. As she worked, Clara became aware of Axe watching her, not with suspicion or concern, but with something that looked almost like wonder. She glanced at him between bites, suddenly self-conscious. What his response was quiet meant only for her. You're a natural. Most people, they're either too scared to try, or they treat her like she's made of glass or like she can't understand. You just, you see her. Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion she could not quite name. She's easy to see. She's got the brightest eyes in this whole diner. Lily made a sound, a small vocalization that Axe clearly understood, because his eyes went suspiciously bright before he looked away, clearing his throat. They fell into a comfortable rhythm after that. Clara feeding Lily, Axe and his brothers eating and talking in low voices about roads traveled and roads still to come. She learned that they were riding from California to Oklahoma, that Axe had recently become a single father, under circumstances he did not elaborate on, that these four men, Viper and Chains and Gunner, and the quiet one called Smoke, had appointed themselves as Lily's uncles and protectors. The biker, called Gunner, scarred and gruff, with a face that looked like it had been broken and reassembled multiple times, watched Clara with approval. You really are good at this. You work with disabled kids or something, Clara explained while helping Lily with another bite. My cousin Sophia, she's 12 now. Her mom works 2 jobs, so I help out when I can. Sophie's taught me a lot about patience. She smiled at Lily, and about how the best conversations don't always need words. When Lily had finished as much as she could eat, Clara carefully wiped her mouth with a napkin, making sure to be gentle around sensitive areas. You did such a good job, Lily. I'm so proud of you. Lily's eyes locked with hers, and Clara saw something in them that made her heart squeeze. Gratitude, connection, a spark of joy that transformed the child's face into something so beautiful it hurt to witness. Axe cleared his throat, his voice rough when he spoke. What do we owe you for your time? Clara stood collecting plates with movements that had become automatic through years of waitress work. For feeding a beautiful little girl who just made my whole evening better, not a cent. That was my pleasure. Axe's voice carried intensity that bordered on fierce. Clara, I mean it. She met his gaze directly, wanting him to understand. Some things you don't do for money. You do them because they're right, because everyone deserves kindness. She looked at Lily. Because she's worth it, sweetheart. Axe stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. For a moment, Clara thought she might have overstepped, might have offended this dangerous man, who could hurt her in ways she did not want to imagine. But then he pulled out his wallet and extracted not money but a business card, pressing it into her hand with urgency that felt ceremonial. His voice dropped lower, more intense. This has my number. I'm serious about this. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. You need your car fixed, your rent paid, someone giving you trouble, you call. He leaned closer, his size suddenly overwhelming, but not threatening, just present in a way that demanded attention. You showed my daughter dignity tonight. You saw her as a person, not a problem. That's rare. That's precious. And that means you're family now. You understand? Clara looked down at the card, then back up at Axe, whose eyes were fierce with sincerity. Around him, his brothers nodded their agreement. Viper's scarred face held approval. Chains smiled with genuine warmth. Gunner's gruff exterior had softened. Smoke, who had barely spoken all evening, gave a single nod that somehow carried weight. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Thank you. The bikers paid their bill, leaving a tip that was 3 times the cost of the meal. Clara tried to refuse, but Axe would not hear it, pressing the money into her hand with the same intensity he had shown with the card. Before they left, each of them shook her hand. Viper thanked her for her kindness. Chains called her an angel. Gunner said Lily was lucky to have met her. Smoke, true to his quiet nature, just squeezed her hand once and nodded. Axe carefully maneuvered Lily's wheelchair toward the door, but paused at the threshold, looking back. Clara, I mean what I said. You're family now. In our world, that's sacred. You remember that. Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She watched through the window as Axe carefully transferred Lily from her wheelchair to a specially modified sidecar attached to his motorcycle, securing her with practiced ease. The wheelchair was collapsed and strapped to another bike. Within minutes, the engines roared to life, and the group pulled out of the parking lot and Station Axe in the lead with his precious cargo beside him. The diner felt quieter after they left. Emptier somehow. Dusty emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face showing something that might have been respect. Been running this place for 40 years, never seen anything quite like that. Clara tucked the card carefully into her apron pocket, her hands trembling slightly. They're good people. Dusty's response was careful. Maybe, but they're also Iron Kings. That's a motorcycle club, Clara, not a charity organization. You be careful. She nodded but did not remove the card from her pocket. Something about the evening felt significant in ways she could not quite articulate. She had been terrified of those men, had wanted to hide from them, had felt every cell in her body screaming danger. But they had been gentle with a disabled child. They had been grateful for simple kindness. They had seen her as worthy of their protection and called her family. Clara finished her shift and drove home to her small apartment in a complex that had seen better decades. She made herself dinner, cheap pasta that stretched her grocery budget, and tried to study for her CNA certification test, while her mind kept drifting back to bright hazel eyes and a father's exhausted gratitude. She finally gave up and got ready for bed, the business card still in her apron pocket. Jake, Axe Thornton, Iron King's MC president, along with a phone number and an address for their clubhouse outside Albuquerque. She pulled out her phone and, knowing it was probably a mistake, searched for Iron King's Motorcycle Club. The results were mixed. Some charity work, toy drives for hospitalized kids, support for veterans, but also arrest records, FBI investigations, suspected links to drug trafficking and other organized crime. The club had a reputation that was not entirely clean, that suggested danger and lawlessness, and the kind of violence Clara had sworn to avoid after her father's death. Then she searched for Jake Thornton and found exactly what she had been afraid of finding. A newspaper article from 6 months ago archived by the Albuquerque Journal. Iron King's MC president released after 8-year prison sentence. The photo showed a younger version of Axe Harder, somehow, without the vulnerability that had shown through when he looked at his daughter. The article detailed his conviction for aggravated assault, serving 8 years in Folsom State Prison in California, released on parole 6 months ago. He had nearly killed a man in a bar fight, put him in a coma for 2 weeks. The victim had survived, but with permanent injuries. Clara felt her blood turn cold. She had fed a convicted felon's daughter, had taken his card, had let him know her name and where she worked, had shown him kindness that he might interpret as weakness or opportunity. The fear that had been singing through her nervous system all evening crystallized into something approaching panic. She researched more, falling down a rabbit hole of articles and court records and police reports. The Iron Kings had a history: drug trafficking allegations, weapons charges, multiple members with prison records. The club's president before Axe had served 15 years for manslaughter. This was not a group of misunderstood men. This was an organization with genuine criminal ties, real violence in its past, connections to activities that destroyed lives and communities. Clara thought about her father bleeding out on pavement, while men wearing motorcycle club patches shouted and fought and killed over territory and pride and money. Thought about how her mother had begged her to leave New Mexico to escape the violence to build a life somewhere safer. Thought about how she had stayed because leaving felt like surrender, but maybe staying had been the real mistake all along. She should throw away the card, should forget this evening ever happened, should avoid Dusty's on nights when bikers might show up, should protect herself from men who lived dangerous lives and brought that danger to everyone around them. But Lily's bright eyes haunted her, and Axe's exhausted gratitude. And the way those rough men had been so gentle with a disabled child who needed more care than most people had the patience to provide. Clara put the card in her wallet, told herself she would never call, and lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling while her mind played out scenarios where kindness led to disaster and compassion got her killed, just like it had gotten her father killed 5 years ago. 3 weeks passed. Life returned to the rhythm Clara had established over 5 years of waitressing and saving and dreaming about a nursing career that never quite materialized. She worked her shifts at Dusty's. She visited Sophie every weekend, helping her aunt with the care routines that were second nature now. She added $23 to her savings account and watched the nursing school deadline creep closer while the funds required remained impossibly distant. She did not see the Iron Kings again, did not hear motorcycles in the parking lot, did not have to face the complicated tangle of fear and fascination that the bikers had created in her mind. She almost convinced herself the entire evening had been an anomaly, a one-time encounter that would fade into memory without consequence. Then her car broke down on the way to work. The transmission gave out on a stretch of Route 66 between her apartment and the diner, the vehicle shuddering and refusing to shift gears until Clara had to pull onto the shoulder with hazard lights flashing. She called a tow truck, rode with the driver to the nearest mechanic, and listened as a man with 30 years of experience told her the transmission was completely shot. $1,800 to repair it, $3,200 to replace it with a new transmission that might actually last more than 6 months. Clara felt the world tilt sideways. She had $3,847 in savings. $1,800 would devastate her nursing school fund, set her back more than a year of careful saving. $3,200 would essentially end the dream altogether, leave her starting from scratch with no realistic path forward before the tuition deadline. She sat in the mechanic's waiting room for 2 hours trying to figure out alternatives. She could take the bus to work, but the routes did not run early enough for her opening shifts. She could ask for a loan from her mother, but Rosa was barely making ends meet in Texas and had no money to spare. She could try to find a cheaper mechanic, but 3 other shops quoted even higher prices when she called. She could just let the car sit and walk away from it, but then she would have no transportation at all and would lose her job within a week. Clara pulled out her wallet, checking one more time to see if money had magically appeared in her account. It had not. But her fingers brushed against a business card worn now from 3 weeks of carrying it, and she stared at the name printed there. Jake Axe, Thornton Iron King's MC president, and his words from that evening. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call. She should not call, should not take help from a convicted felon with ties to organized crime, should not put herself in debt to a man whose world intersected with violence and danger, should not cross this line because, once crossed, there might be no way back. But she was desperate, and he had offered. And maybe, just maybe, good people could come from bad circumstances, and reformed criminals deserved chances to prove they had changed. Clara pulled out her phone, her hands shaking, and dialed the number before fear could override need. It rang twice before a rough voice answered, instantly recognizable, despite 3 weeks having passed. His voice carried surprise and something that sounded almost like pleasure. Clara. She had not identified herself. He had known it was her from a number he should not have had saved. That should have been a warning sign. Instead, it felt almost comforting that he had remembered, had cared enough to save her contact information. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, stripped of the pride that usually kept her from asking for help. My car broke down. You said if I needed anything. He cut her off before she could finish, his response immediate and decisive. Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The call ended. Clara sent the address with shaking fingers. Exactly 19 minutes later, the rumble of a single motorcycle cut through the afternoon quiet, and Axe pulled into the mechanic's parking lot. He was alone this time, no brothers and no Lily. Just one large man on a Harley looking somehow less intimidating without the pack dynamic, but still plenty dangerous. He dismounted and approached Clara with long strides, his weathered face showing concern. "You okay? What happened?" Clara explained about the transmission, about the cost, about her inability to afford either option without destroying her future. Axe listened without interrupting, then walked to the mechanic's bay to examine her car himself. He clearly knew his way around engines, asking technical questions that the mechanic answered with increasing respect. They talked for maybe 10 minutes before Axe returned to where Clara stood, clutching her phone like a lifeline. His question was direct. "What do you want to do?" Clara admitted what she had been trying not to say out loud. "I can't afford either option. I've been saving for nursing school. Tuition's due in 8 months. If I spend this money, I'm done. The dream's over." Axe turned back to the mechanic without hesitation. "Replace the transmission. Do it right. I don't want her breaking down again in 6 months." "Well, the mechanic nodded. "Need a deposit to order the part. Half now, half when it's done." Axe pulled out his wallet and counted out $1,600 in cash, handing it over like it was nothing more significant than lunch money. The mechanic's eyebrows rose, but he took the money, wrote up a receipt, and told them the car would be ready in 2 days. Clara tried to speak, but Axe held up one massive hand. "Let's talk outside." They sat on a bench outside the mechanic shop, afternoon sun beating down on them with the particular brutality of New Mexico summer. Clara finally found her voice. "I can't accept this. I'll pay you back. Every penny. I'll set up a payment plan," or Axe cut her off with gentleness that did not match his appearance. "You fed my daughter. You gave me 20 minutes to eat a hot meal in peace. This is nothing." Clara's voice came out sharp with emotion she could not control. "This is $3,200. That's not nothing." Axe turned to face her fully, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made it impossible to look away. "You want the truth? That night at the diner, we'd been on the road for 3 days straight. I'd slept maybe 6 hours total. I was exhausted. I was worried about Lily. I was questioning every decision I'd ever made as a father. And you showed up and made it better. You saw my daughter as a person. You treated me with respect I didn't deserve. You gave me hope that maybe the world wasn't as hard as I thought it was." He paused, his voice roughening with emotion. "So yeah, I'm paying for your transmission. And you're not paying me back because you already gave me something more valuable than money. You gave me 20 minutes of peace and a reminder that good people still exist." Clara felt tears threatening but held them back through sheer force of will. "I saw the newspaper article about your prison sentence." Axe did not flinch, did not try to deny or deflect. "You want to hear that story?" She nodded, needing to understand who this man was and whether accepting his help would destroy her the way associating with bikers had destroyed her father. Axe's voice went flat, emotionless, recounting facts without trying to justify them. 8 years ago, my brother Smoke was jumped by 5 guys outside a bar in Oakland. They were beating him to death. I intervened with a baseball bat, put one of them in a coma for 2 weeks, nearly killed him. Got arrested, convicted of aggravated assault, served 8 years in Folsom. He met her eyes. "I'm not proud of what I did, but I'd do it again to save my brother. That's who I am. I protect my family. Sometimes that means violence, and I've paid the price for it." Clara processed this, trying to reconcile the violent criminal with the gentle father. "What about Lily? Where was she?" Pain flashed across Axe's face. "Lily was 2 when I went to prison, just diagnosed with CP. Her mother, Denise, seemed like she could handle it. We got married when Lily was 4 while I was inside. Denise promised to wait to take care of our daughter, to build a life for when I got out." His voice grew bitter. "Got released 6 months ago. Denise was gone. Left Lily with my mother 8 months before that. No note, no contact, just disappeared. Mom's 68 and can't handle Lily's care. So now it's me learning everything from scratch, trying to be the father my daughter needs when I've got no idea what I'm doing." Clara felt her heart break for him. Despite every warning, her rational mind was screaming, "I'm sorry." They sat in silence for a long moment, processing confessions that had been exchanged too quickly for either of them to take back. Finally, Axe stood, pulling his keys from his pocket. His voice was carefully neutral. Car will be ready Thursday. I can give you a ride home now if you need one. Clara looked at the motorcycle, felt fear spike through her system at the thought of climbing onto one, of wrapping herself around this dangerous man and trusting him with her safety. She had not been on a motorcycle since her father died, had sworn she never would, but she had no other way home, could not afford an Uber, could not keep taking from this man who had already given too much. Okay, thank you. Axe handed her his helmet. Safety first. She stared at it, then at his head. But what about you? His smile was slight but genuine. I've got a thick skull, been tested multiple times, you wear it. Clara put on the helmet with shaking hands, trying to figure out where to sit, how to hold on, whether this was the moment her life would end in a crash that mirrored her father's death. Axe climbed on first, steadied the bike, then gestured for her to get on behind him. Her voice came out small. I've never done this before. His response was patient. Put your feet on those pegs. Hold on to my waist. Lean when I lean. Don't fight the turns. And if you get scared, tap my shoulder. I'll pull over. Clara climbed on her body, rigid with terror. She wrapped her arms around Axe's waist, feeling the solidity of him, the warmth of another human being who was supposed to be her enemy, but felt somehow safe. The engine roared to life and Clara's entire body started shaking. Axe must have felt it because he pulled over before they even left the parking lot, turning off the engine. You okay? Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face inside the helmet. My father was killed by bikers. 5 years ago, I watched him die. Axe was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine sorrow. I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry you're scared. We can call a cab. I'll pay for it. You don't have to do this. Clara thought about her father, about what he would say if he could see hers now. Thought about how he had always taught her to face fear rather than run from it, to judge people by their actions rather than their appearance, to give second chances because everyone deserved redemption. Her voice was steadier when she answered, No, I need to do this. I need to face it. Axe nodded, started the engine again, and pulled out of the parking lot with such careful precision that Clara realized he was deliberately going slow, deliberately being gentle, deliberately trying to make this easier for her. They drove through Albuquerque at maybe half the speed limit, Axe taking turns so carefully that Clara barely had to lean. By the time they reached her apartment complex, she had stopped shaking. He helped her off the bike, made sure she was steady on her feet. Thank you for trusting me with that. I know it wasn't easy. Clara removed the helmet and handed it back, her face wet with tears and sweat. Thank you for the ride, for the car, for everything. Axe's expression held something Clara could not quite identify. Car will be ready Thursday. I'll bring it by the diner if that's easier than you coming to get it. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As he rode away, she saw her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watching from her window on the second floor, her disapproving face visible even at distance. Clara knew there would be consequences, that Mrs. Chen would tell the landlord that associating with bikers would cause problems in ways she could not yet predict. But Axe had saved her nursing school dream, had treated her with kindness and respect, had shared his story and his pain, had been gentle when she was terrified. And maybe, just maybe, that mattered more than fear and prejudice in the ghosts of the past. Mrs. Chen confronted Clara the next morning before she could leave for work, her elderly frame blocking the apartment building's entrance with surprising effectiveness. Her voice carried the particular authority of someone who had lived in the complex longer than anyone else and considered herself its moral guardian. I saw that biker yesterday. Those people are dangerous. I'm going to tell Mr. Rodriguez. Clara tried to keep her voice level, professional, the tone she used with difficult customers. He was just helping me with my car, Mrs. Chen. Nothing to worry about. The older woman's expression hardened. Your father would be ashamed. Associating with criminals and thugs, you dishonor his memory. The words landed like physical blows, each one finding the guilt Clara had been carrying for 5 years. She pushed past Mrs. Chen without responding, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall where anyone could see them. The bus ride to work took 45 minutes, eating into time she could have spent sleeping, and she arrived at Dusty's exhausted before her shift even started. Her phone buzzed as she was tying her apron. A text from an unknown number that she somehow knew was Axe before she even opened it. Mechanic needs 2 days for parts. I can pick you up for work until car's ready. What time? Clara stared at the message for a full minute, weighing options that all felt wrong in different ways. She could refuse and spend 3 hours daily on buses. She could accept and invite more judgment from neighbors and maybe lose her apartment. She could call her mother and beg for money she knew Rosa did not have. Her fingers typed before her brain could override them. 6 a.m. Thank you. The response came immediately. Be there at 5:45. Axe pulled into her apartment complex at exactly 5:45 the next morning, the Harley's rumble cutting through pre-dawn quiet like an alarm clock for everyone within 3 blocks. Clara climbed on with hands that shook less than they had 2 days ago, wrapped her arms around his waist, and tried not to think about Mrs. Chen watching from her window, or Mr. Rodriguez preparing an eviction notice, or her father's ghost judging her choices. The ride to Dusty's took 8 minutes. Axe drove carefully, kept his speed reasonable, took turns with the same gentle precision he had shown before. When they arrived, he waited until she had dismounted safely before speaking. His voice carried concern that felt genuine. You doing okay? You look tired. Clara's laugh came out bitter. My neighbor thinks I'm a disgrace. My landlord will probably evict me, and I'm 3 hours short on sleep because buses don't run early enough. But yeah, I'm great. Axe's expression darkened in ways that reminded Clara he was capable of violence when provoked. Your neighbor giving you trouble, I can talk to her. The immediate spike of terror must have shown on Clara's face because Axe held up both hands in a gesture of peace. I mean, talk, Clara. Just talk. Explain you're a good person helping my daughter. Nothing threatening. Clara shook her head. That would make it worse. She already thinks I'm associating with criminals. You showing up at her door would confirm everything she believes. Axe absorbed this silently, his jaw tight with frustration that had nowhere productive to go. Finally, he just nodded. Call me when your shift ends. I'll pick you up. The pattern repeated for 2 days. Axe arrived before dawn, drove Clara to work with care that felt almost protective, picked her up at shift's end. They talked during rides, conversations that started cautious and grew gradually easier. Clara learned he worked construction union electrician, honest labor, that paid bills and provided health insurance for Lily. The MC was family and support system, not the criminal enterprise she had feared. They had done some questionable things when they were younger, Axe admitted, but having a disabled daughter changed priorities completely. His voice carried conviction when he explained. Everything's different now. We do charity work, veteran support, fundraising for disabled kids programs. The illegal shit, the drug trafficking allegations, that was old guard. We cleaned house when I took over as president. Some members didn't like it and left. But the ones who stayed, they're good men trying to do right. Clara wanted to believe him. Wanted to think people could change, that organizations could reform, that redemption was possible for those who genuinely tried. But her father's death whispered warnings she could not quite silence. Thursday evening, Axe delivered her car to Dusty's parking lot. New transmission installed, engine running, smooth interior, detailed to showroom condition, full tank of gas. He refused any discussion of payment beyond handing her a receipt marked paid in full and telling her the warranty covered 2 years or 50,000 miles. But he had brought Lily with him, the little girl secure in her sidecar, and the moment Lily saw Clara, her entire face lit up with joy that needed no words to convey. Clara found herself feeding Lily dinner, while Axe ate the routine, already comfortable after just one previous encounter, the connection between them feeling almost familial in its ease. Viper arrived with the other brothers to meet up with Axe, all of them remembering Clara and greeting her warmly. The one called Smoke, who rarely spoke, actually smiled when he saw her with Lily. And the joker, Rev, could not resist commentary that made Axe's weathered face flush with embarrassment. Rev's grin was mischievous. Axe talks about you all the time. Clara this, Clara that. It's actually kind of annoying. Axe's voice came out sharp. Shut up, Rever. But the teasing felt good-natured, brotherly, the kind of ribbing that came from genuine affection rather than malice. Clara found herself smiling despite the awkwardness, despite knowing she should maintain distance, despite every warning her rational mind kept screaming. Chains leaned forward, his expression sincere beneath the beard. We're having a charity barbecue Saturday at the clubhouse, raising money for disabled kids program. Would mean a lot if you came. Lily would love it. The invitation hung in the air, weighted with implications Clara could not quite sort through. Going to an MC clubhouse felt like crossing a line from which there would be no return. But refusing felt like rejecting this found family that had shown her nothing but kindness. Her voice came out hesitant. I'll think about it. That weekend, Clara helped her Aunt Teresa with Sophie's care at the house in Santa Fe. Bathing, feeding, physical therapy exercises that Sophie endured with patience and humor that Clara found inspiring. Teresa watched Clara with knowing eyes while they worked together to transfer Sophie from wheelchair to bed. Teresa's voice carried maternal concern. Mija, be careful with those bikers. I know you see good in them, but these men live dangerous lives. Clara tried to explain about Lily, about Axe's devotion, about the charity work in the reformed organization. But Sophie overheard from where she lay on the bed, her body rigid but her mind sharp, and she signed with hands that moved slowly but deliberately. Teresa translated for Clara, even though Clara understood basic ASL. She's asking if they're nice to the disabled girl. Clara signed back. Very nice. They love her so much. Sophie's response was simple but carried wisdom that cut through adult prejudice with childlike clarity. Then they're good people. Clara drove back to Albuquerque thinking about judgment and redemption, about who deserves second chances and who got to decide. She had almost convinced herself to accept the barbecue invitation when her world exploded in the early hours of Wednesday morning. The smoke alarm woke her at 2:17. Clara's first confused thought was that she had left something on the stove, but she had not cooked dinner, had just eaten cold cereal before falling into exhausted sleep. Then she smelled it. Not burnt food, but something chemical accelerant, the kind of smell that meant intentional fire rather than accident. She grabbed her phone and ran for the door, smoke already thick in the hallway. Other residents were emerging from apartments, confusion turning to panic as flames became visible at the building's far end. Clara made it outside in pajamas and bare feet, stood shivering in the parking lot while sirens wailed in the distance, and her entire life burned behind cinder block walls that were supposed to have been fireproof. The fire department arrived within 10 minutes. 3 trucks and 15 firefighters attacking flames that had already consumed half the building. Clara watched numbly as everything she owned turned to smoke and ash. Her clothes, her books, her father's watch that she kept in a drawer because wearing it hurt too much, but she could not bear to part with it. 5 years of careful saving and cautious living gone. The fire marshal arrived as dawn broke, examining the scene with professional detachment that Clara envied. He found her among the Red Cross volunteers distributing blankets and coffee, his expression grim. His voice carried certainty when he spoke. This was arson. Accelerant poured in multiple locations. Ignition point appears to be your apartment specifically. You have any enemies? Anyone want to hurt you? Clara's mind went blank. She had no enemies. She was a waitress who kept to herself, who worked double shifts and saved money and bothered no one. Who could possibly want to hurt her? But even as she thought it, Mrs. Chen's words echoed through her memory. Those people are dangerous. And the fire marshal's next question confirmed her growing horror. You been seen with anyone unusual lately? Gang members, criminals, people who might have enemies of their own. Clara's hands started shaking so badly she dropped her coffee cup, hot liquid splashing across pavement. The fire marshal took her silence as answer and pressed harder. Ms. Martinez, if you're in danger, we need to know. If someone targeted you because of an association, that information could help us catch who did this. She gave him Axe's name and number with a voice that did not sound like her own. Told him about the bikers who came to the diner, about helping with the disabled girl, about accepting a ride in a car repair. Made it sound innocent because it was innocent, but watched the marshal's face close off with judgment she recognized from Mrs. Chen could not fight anymore. He left her with a card and instructions to call if she remembered anything else. Clara sat on the curb wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, watching smoke still rising from her building, and knew with absolute certainty that this was her fault. Not that she had started the fire, but that somehow her association with the Iron Kings had painted a target on her back. At 4 in the morning, with nowhere to go and no family within driving distance, and minimal savings that would not cover first month, last month, and deposit on a new apartment, Clara made a call she knew she should not make. Axe answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the hour. Clara. She tried to speak, but only a sob came out, all the terror and exhaustion and loss hitting her at once. Axe's voice sharpened with concern that felt almost paternal. "Where are you? What happened?" Clara managed to get the words out between sobs. "My apartment burned down. They said it was arson. They said someone targeted my apartment specifically." The silence on the other end lasted maybe 3 seconds. But in that time, Clara heard something shift. When Axe spoke again, his voice carried rage barely contained beneath concern. "Where are you right now? I'm coming." She gave him the address. He arrived 20 minutes later, with Viper in chains, all three men looking dangerous in ways that would have terrified her a month ago, but now just felt protective. Axe pulled her into a hug without asking permission, his massive frame surrounding her with warmth and safety, while she cried into his leather vest. His voice rumbled against her ear. "You're okay. That's what matters. Everything else we can fix." But then he spoke to the fire marshal, used connections Clara had not known he possessed, and returned with information that made his expression go dark in ways that reminded her he was capable of violence. Axe's voice was tight when he finally spoke to her. "Clara, I need to tell you something. This might be my fault." He explained about Desert Reapers, a rival MC that dealt drugs and ran guns and did everything the Iron Kings had stopped doing years ago. The Reapers had been watching the Kings, looking for weaknesses, trying to find pressure points they could exploit. They had seen Axe with Clara, had followed him to her apartment, had decided to send a message. Clara felt the world tilt sideways. "You're saying I almost died because of you, because I helped you." The guilt on Axe's face was so profound it hurt to witness. "I'm saying I should have warned you, should have protected you better, should have known they'd see you as a target." Viper stepped in, his scarred face showing frustration. "Axe, we don't know for sure it was Reapers, but Axe was certain. Who else? Timing's too perfect. They're escalating, going after civilians now, trying to draw us into war." Clara's terror crystallized into something sharp and focused. "They'll come after me again. They know where I work. They know what I look like." Axe's response was immediate. "Not if you're under our protection. Move into the clubhouse temporarily. We'll keep you safe until police catch whoever did this." Every instinct Clara possessed screamed that this was wrong. Moving into an MC clubhouse crossed every line, destroyed whatever remained of her reputation, made her complicit in a world she had sworn to avoid. But she had nowhere else to go. Red Cross could provide a hotel for 3 days maximum. After that, she would be homeless, with no money for deposits and no references, since her previous landlord's building had burned down. Her voice came out small when she answered. "Just until I can find a new apartment. Just until police catch whoever did this." Axe's relief was visible. "As long as you need. Your family." The Iron King's compound sat on 10 acres outside Albuquerque proper main clubhouse, surrounded by several smaller residences in a layout that suggested both community and security. Clara had expected something dirty, chaotic, dangerous. Instead, she found landscaping and cleanliness, and children playing in a yard while women hung laundry and talked. Maria Chaines's wife welcomed Clara with warmth that felt genuine. She was maybe 40, nurse scrubs visible beneath her sweater, kind eyes that had seen hard things and retained compassion anyway. Her voice carried sincerity. "Any friend of Lily's is friend of ours. That girl has changed Axe completely, made him better." But other women were more cautious, their eyes assessing Clara with suspicion she understood. Keisha Viper's girlfriend was particularly direct. She was maybe late 20s, beautiful in a hard way, that suggested she had survived things that would have broken softer people. Keisha's voice held warning. "Another girl trying to trap a biker. Axe is a good man. He's been through enough. Don't hurt him." Clara wanted to protest that she was not trying to trap anyone, that she was just scared and homeless and desperate. But Keisha's suspicion was reasonable. From the outside, Clara's situation looked exactly like manipulation. Homeless woman moves into MC president's compound, gains access to resources and protection, maybe tries to become permanent fixture through pregnancy or manufactured drama. Axe gave Clara a small guest house separate from the main residences. 1-bedroom bathroom, kitchenette, clean and comfortable, in ways that suggested it was used for visiting family rather than club business. Lily's room was in the main house next door, close enough that Clara could hear if the little girl needed help. Days turned into a week, then 2. Clara helped with Lily daily giving Axe breaks. He desperately needed learning more about cerebral palsy care than she had known was possible. Medications for seizure prevention, physical therapy exercises to maintain range of motion, communication techniques that went beyond words to genuine understanding. She discovered she was good at this natural in ways that made Maria comment more than once that Clara had found her calling. But the longer she stayed, the more complicated everything became. She learned the rhythms of clubhouse life, morning meetings where business was discussed behind closed doors, evening meals where families gathered and children played while adults talked, weekend projects where everyone contributed labor to maintain the compound. It felt less like a criminal organization and more like a small town, complete with gossip and drama and genuine care for neighbors. Clara's mother, Rosa, called on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight with anger that had clearly been building. Teresa told me you're living with a motorcycle gang. Tell me she's wrong. Clara tried to explain about the fire, about having nowhere else to go, about Axe and Lillian, how they were helping her. But Rosa's fury was absolute. Her voice shook. Your father died because of men like them. Gangs, violence, drugs, all of it. How dare you dishonor his memory by joining them? Clara's response came out sharper than intended. I'm not joining them, Mom. I'm accepting help when I need it. There's a difference. Rosa's ultimatum was clear. If you don't leave immediately, don't bother coming back to Texas. You're no daughter of mine. The call ended before Clara could respond. She sat in her small guest house, staring at the phone while tears streamed down her face and the last connection to her blood family severed over choices she had made in desperation. Axe found her an hour later, her crying audible through thin walls. He sat beside her without speaking, his presence solid and comforting in ways that should have felt inappropriate but just felt necessary. His voice was gentle when he finally spoke. Heard you on the phone with your mom. I'm sorry. Clara's voice came out broken. She disowned me. Because of you. Because I stayed here. The guilt on Axe's face was so profound, Clara immediately regretted her words. His voice carried pain when he responded. I'll help you find an apartment tomorrow. First, last deposit, whatever you need. I won't let you sacrifice your family for mine. But Clara realized as he said it that her blood family had already abandoned her. Rosa had moved to Texas and stopped calling except to judge. Her extended family had drifted away after Marco's death, uncomfortable with grief they could not fix. She had been alone for 5 years, isolated by trauma and poverty and dreams that never materialize. The Iron Kings had fed her, housed her, protected her, treated her like she mattered. They were not perfect. They had criminal pasts and questionable connections and capacity for violence. But they had also shown up when no one else had. Her voice steadied as she spoke. I don't want to leave yet. Not until the police catch whoever burned down my building. Not until I know I'm safe. Something in Axe's expression shifted, relief mixed with emotion Clara could not quite identify. Okay, stay as long as you need. They sat in comfortable silence while dusk turned to full dark outside. Finally, Axe stood, moving toward the door before pausing at the threshold. His voice carried vulnerability she had rarely heard from him. Clara, I need you to know something. You being here helping with Lily, it's not just convenient. You've become important to us. To me. The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to explore. Clara's response was careful. You've become important to me too. You and Lily both. Axe nodded once and left before either of them could say more. Clara lay awake for hours thinking about lines being crossed and families being chosen, and whether accepting love from dangerous people made her dangerous too. 3 weeks after Clara moved into the clubhouse, an expensive car pulled up to the compound's entrance. Sleek knew the kind of vehicle that announced wealth and status in ways that felt out of place among the Harleys and pickup trucks. A blonde woman emerged dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than Clara made in a month, her face professionally made up and her posture radiating confidence. Axe was outside working on his motorcycle when the woman arrived. Clara watched from her guest house window as recognition and rage transformed his face into something almost frightening. He stood, his massive frame going rigid with tension, and walked toward the woman with steps that looked like he was fighting the urge to run. Clara could not hear what they said, but body language told the story. The woman was Denise, had to be based on Axe's reaction. Lily's mother, who had abandoned her daughter 8 months ago and disappeared without contact. And she had a lawyer with her, a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase that suggested this was not a social call. Axe's voice carried across the compound loud enough for everyone to hear. You left her for 8 months. You don't get to come back now. Denise's response was too quiet to hear, but her lawyer produced papers and handed them to Axe with professional efficiency. Clara watched Axe read them, his face going pale, then flushing with color that suggested blood pressure spiking toward dangerous levels. He looked up at Denise with betrayal so raw it hurt to witness from 50 feet away. You're filing for custody after what you did. The lawyer's voice was loud enough to carry. My client had postpartum depression, a medical condition that impaired her judgment. She sought treatment and is now healthy. She has every right to reunite with her daughter. Clara's legal knowledge was minimal, but even she understood the implications. Custody battles favored mothers, especially mothers with no criminal record facing fathers who had served 8 years for violent felonies. Denise lived in a nice apartment, had a stable job, and pharmaceutical sales could provide material comfort. Axe lived at an MC clubhouse, worked construction, had prison time and parole restrictions. The lawyer continued with professional detachment. Mr. Thornton, my client is willing to negotiate reasonable visitation, but Lily deserves to be raised in a stable, safe environment, not a motorcycle club compound. Denise's voice finally rose loud enough to hear. I made a mistake. I was sick, but I'm better now, and I want my daughter back. Axe's response was almost a roar. You can't take her. She's my whole world. You can't just take her. But the lawyer was already walking back to the car, Denise following with her head high. They drove away, leaving Axe standing alone holding papers that threatened to destroy everything he had built. Clara found him 10 minutes later, sitting on the ground beside his motorcycle, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs he was trying to contain. She sat beside him without speaking, her hand finding his massive one and holding tight. His voice came out broken when he finally spoke. I can't lose her, Clara. I won't survive losing her. Viper appeared with Chains and Gunner, all three men looking grim. Viper had been on his phone calling in favors and gathering information with the efficiency of someone who knew how to work systems most people did not understand. His voice was tight with anger when he reported findings. I looked into Denise. She's not back for Lily, she's back for money. He explained about disability benefits. Lily qualified for SSI payments, medical coverage support services, that totaled nearly $3,000 monthly. Denise had burned through her savings over 8 months of partying and shopping, had a boyfriend who left when the money ran out, was facing eviction from her expensive apartment. Viper's conclusion was brutal. She sees Lily as an income stream. She'll get custody, put Lily in a state facility, collect the checks, and never visit. It's a kind hon, and any family court judge will see right through it. But Chains, older and more cynical, shook his head. Judges see what they want to see. Mother with no record versus MC president with violent felony. They'll give Lily to Denise without thinking twice. Clara listened to them strategize and realized she could help. Character witness testimony, expert opinion on caregiving, quality neutral, third party with medical background. Her testimony could make the difference. But if she testified for an MC president in family court, her nursing school application would be compromised. Background checks would flag her association. References from the dean would mention her involvement with a motorcycle club. Hospitals would question her judgment. Her entire future could be jeopardized. Axe must have seen the calculation in her eyes because he shook his head. No, you've already sacrificed too much. I won't let you destroy your future for us. But Clara thought about Lily's bright eyes and Axe's exhausted devotion and Sophie's signed wisdom. Then they're good people. She thought about her father's lessons about courage and compassion. She thought about what kind of nurse she wanted to be, what kind of person she wanted to become. Her voice was steady when she answered, You're my family now. Family doesn't abandon family. I'll testify. The scholarship letter arrived 3 days later, forwarded from Dusty's, where Clara still received mail. Acceptance to University of New Mexico nursing program. Congratulations on her admission tuition information enclosed. She opened it with hands that shook, knowing the amount would be high, but hoping it had not increased too much. $47,000 for first year, up from $45,000 when she had applied 6 months ago. Books and supplies another 3,000. Living expenses if she did not work full-time, which would be impossible during the intensive program. 50,000 total, bare minimum. Financial aid offered 12,000 in loans and grants. Still needed 38,000 just to start. Clara stared at the numbers and felt her dreams crumbling. Even if she saved every penny from now until fall, even if she worked triple shifts and lived on nothing, she would come up short. The nursing career she had spent 5 years working toward was slipping away because of math that would not cooperate, no matter how hard she tried. Axe found her sitting outside her guest house that evening, the letter crumpled in her hands, her face wet with tears she had stopped trying to hide. He sat beside her, his presence solid and comforting, and waited for her to speak. Her voice came out defeated. "I got into nursing school. Can't afford it." Axe read the letter she handed him, his weathered face showing understanding. When he spoke, his voice carried certainty that left no room for argument. "Let me pay for it. Full tuition all 4 years. It's the least I can do after everything you have done for Lily and me." Clara's response was immediate. "I can't let you do that. It's too much." But Axe's voice grew firmer. "You're helping me keep my daughter. You're testifying in court, risking your career, putting everything on the line. Paying for nursing school is nothing compared to what you're giving me." Clara wanted to accept, wanted to let him solve her problems with money she knew he somehow had, despite working construction. But taking $50,000 from a man she was testifying for looked like bribery, compromised her integrity, made her testimony tainted. They argued for an hour before reaching compromise. Loan not gift. Legal contract, proper interest rate, payment plan, starting after graduation. Everything documented and above board so it looked like business rather than charity. Clara accepted reluctantly, knowing she had no other option, but hating the debt and the obligation and the way it tied her to this dangerous man who was somehow becoming the most important person in her life. Viper found Clara 2 days before the custody hearing, his scarred face showing discomfort with what he was about to reveal. They sat in her guest house while he explained where Axe's money came from and why she deserved to know before testifying. His voice was careful. "Axe works construction, but that barely covers Lily's medical bills. To afford her equipment, her care, and now your tuition, he took a loan from the MC, 50,000 at low interest payment plan over 10 years. Clara nodded, not seeing the problem yet. Viper continued with obvious reluctance. "The MC's money comes from the garage business now. Legitimate motorcycle repair shop, fully licensed, profitable. But years ago, before Axe went to prison, some of that seed money came from illegal activity, drug distribution profits that got laundered into the garage." He met Clara's eyes. "It's clean now. The business is legal, the money is documented, everything above board. But it's built on a dirty foundation. You deserve to know before you tie yourself to it." Clara felt the world shift slightly. Could she accept money with criminal origins? Could she testify for a man whose organization had profited from drugs that destroyed lives and communities? What if the nursing board found out? What if hospitals refused to hire her? She thought about her father, who had worked at a restaurant that probably hired undocumented workers, who had bought a car from a dealership that had been sued for fraud, who had lived in a world where nobody's money was completely clean. She thought about pragmatism versus purity, survival versus principle. Her voice was steady when she answered. "The money is legal now. Axe is reformed now. People deserve second chances. I'm taking the loan." Viper's relief was visible. "You're good for him, Clara. He's better since you showed up." The custody hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Fernando Maria's cousin, who specialized in family law, prepped Clara on what to expect. Denise's lawyer would attack her credibility question. Her relationship with Axe suggests bias or inappropriate involvement. His voice was clinical. "They'll say you're sleeping with him. They'll question your judgment. They'll make you look like a gold digger or a troubled woman with poor boundaries. You need to stay calm, stick to facts, don't get emotional." Clara nodded, taking notes, preparing herself for character assassination. But underneath the preparation, terror was building. What if her testimony made things worse? What if the judge saw her MC association as proof that Axe provided unstable environment? What if she destroyed his chances instead of helping? The night before court, Clara could not sleep. She sat outside her guest house under New Mexico stars while anxiety sang through her nervous system. Axe found her there past midnight, his own sleeplessness evident in the shadows under his eyes. He sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "You don't have to do this. I'll find another way. I can't let you sacrifice everything." Clara turned to face him, this dangerous man who had somehow become her family. "There is no other way, and I want to do this." Her voice grew stronger. "I care about you, Axe. I care about Lily. You're the family I chose, and that means fighting for you even when it's hard." Axe's expression held emotion too complex to name. "After this is over, after the hearing, I want to take you on a real date. No debt, no obligation, no crisis. Just you and me getting to know each other without chaos." Clara smiled despite her fear. "I'd like that." They sat in comfortable silence under stars that had witnessed human drama for millennia and would continue long after their particular story ended. Almost kissed but did not, saving it for after the hearing for a moment untainted by desperation and fear. Tomorrow they would face family court in a system stacked against them. Tomorrow Clara would testify and risk everything she had worked for. Tomorrow would determine whether love and loyalty and chosen family could triumph over biology and prejudice and the weight of criminal past. But tonight they sat together under vast New Mexico sky, two people who had found each other in impossible circumstances and drew strength from connection that felt like the only real thing in a world built on shifting sand and uncertain futures. The Bernalillo County Courthouse felt too iron and too cold, its marble floors and high ceilings designed to intimidate anyone who entered seeking justice. Clara sat in the hallway outside Family Court Division 3, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Fernando paced near the water fountain, reviewing notes he had probably memorized days ago. Axe sat perfectly still beside Clara, his body rigid with tension that looked like it might shatter him if he moved too suddenly. Judge Patricia Valdez had a reputation for being fair but stern no-nonsense in her approach to family law. Fernando had explained that she would not be swayed by emotion or sympathy, only by evidence and testimony that proved what served the child's best interest. Lily was not present, spared the trauma of watching adults fight over her oyster currently with Maria, who had taken the day off work to provide care. Denise arrived in a navy suit that screamed respectable professional, her lawyer beside her carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. She did not look at Axe, did not acknowledge his presence, just walked into the courtroom with her head high like she had already won. The hearing began with procedural matters. Clara barely followed her mind, focused on the testimony she would have to give. Denise's lawyer presented his case, first painting a picture of devoted mother who had suffered medical crisis and now sought reunion with her daughter. He brought medical records documenting postpartum depression, diagnosis, treatment records, showing therapy and medication, employment verification, proving stable income. His voice carried professional authority. "Ms. Thornton lives in a safe neighborhood, earns $60,000 annually in pharmaceutical sales, has no criminal record. She can provide Lily with stability, appropriate educational opportunities, and a normal childhood away from the dangerous influences of a motorcycle club environment." He displayed photos that made the Iron King's compound look threatening. Motorcycles with skull imagery, leather vests with patches, large men who looked capable of violence because they were capable of violence. The implication was clear without being stated directly. What kind of father raises a disabled child in this environment? Fernando's turn came next. He presented a different narrative, one backed by medical records that told a story Denise's polished appearance could not overcome. Under Axe's care, Lily had not missed a single medical appointment in 6 months. Her seizure control was excellent, her weight stable, her development progressing. Under Denise's care, multiple missed appointments, medication errors, documented in emergency room records, weight loss that suggested neglect. His voice was measured but damning. "Mr. Thornton is a devoted father who has organized his entire life around his daughter's needs. He works regular hours to maintain insurance. He has learned medical procedures most parents never master. He has created a support system through his community that ensures Lily always has care even when he must work." Character witnesses took the stand. Maria testified about watching Axe's transformation, how he had become a better man through fatherhood. Chain spoke about brotherhood and protection, about how the MC had cleaned up its operations specifically because Axe demanded it. Lily's physical therapist praised Axe's diligence in maintaining home exercise programs. Then Clara was called. She stood on legs that shook, walked to the witness stand, was sworn in with a voice that barely carried across the courtroom. Fernando's questions were gentle, designed to establish her credibility and relationship to the case. She explained about meeting them at the diner, about her cousin Sophie with cerebral palsy, about offering to help because she recognized the exhaustion of a caregiver running on fumes. She described the following months in careful detail. How she had helped with Lily's care, observed Axe's dedication seen firsthand, what quality caregiving looked like versus what neglect produced. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. I've worked with many caregivers through my cousin. I've seen parents who are overwhelmed, who cut corners, who see their child's disability as burden. And I've seen parents who rise to the challenge, who learn everything they can, who never stop fighting for their child. Mr. Thornton is the most dedicated, loving, competent father I've ever seen. She described Lily's daily routine in detail that only someone intimately involved could provide. Medication schedules, physical therapy exercises, communication techniques, dietary requirements. The complex choreography of caring for a medically fragile child executed flawlessly by a man who had learned it all from scratch while grieving his wife's abandonment. Fernando's final question was designed to address the elephant in the courtroom. Ms. Martinez, you're aware that Mr. Thornton has a criminal record. Clara met the judge's eyes directly. I am. He served 8 years for defending his brother. He's paid his debt to society. He's reformed his life. And none of that changes the fact that he's an excellent father who loves his daughter more than anything in this world. Then came cross-examination, and Denise's lawyer attacked with surgical precision. His voice carried skepticism designed to undermine everything Clara had said. Ms. Martinez, you're currently living at the Iron King's clubhouse, correct? Clara's response was steady. Temporarily, yes, after my apartment was burned down in an arson attack. The lawyer pounced. How convenient. And Mr. Thornton is paying for your nursing school tuition. Clara felt heat rise in her face but kept her voice level. He's providing a loan, yes. Legal contract, proper interest rate, payment plan. I'll repay every penny after graduation. The lawyer's smile was predatory. So you're financially dependent on Mr. Thornton. You live in his compound. He's funding your education. Your testimony is hardly unbiased, wouldn't you say? Clara took a breath, forcing herself to follow Fernando's coaching. Stay calm, stick to facts, don't get defensive. I'm testifying because Lily deserves the truth. Mr. Thornton didn't ask me to testify. I volunteered because I've seen what good care looks like and what neglect looks like. This is about what's best for a little girl, not about my relationship with her father. But the lawyer was not finished. You mentioned your apartment burned down. Fire marshal's report indicates arson possibly related to motorcycle club activity. Doesn't that suggest Mr. Thornton's lifestyle puts those around him in danger? Clara felt the trap closing but refused to back down. She turned to address Judge Valdez, directly, letting desperation show, because hiding it would look like dishonesty. Your Honor, I'm risking my nursing career by testifying. Background checks will show my association with a motorcycle club. Future employers will question my judgment. I'm doing this knowing it might cost me everything I've worked for. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm doing it because it's right, not because I owe Mr. Thornton anything except honesty. Lily is thriving under her father's care. She was failing under her mother's. That's what matters. Fernando called Dr. Patel next, Lily's pediatric neurologist. The doctor reviewed medical records with professional detachment that somehow made her testimony more powerful than emotion would have been. Under Axe's care, excellent outcomes across every metric. Under Denise's care, dangerous deterioration that had required emergency intervention. Dr. Patel's conclusion was clear. Lily is medically complex. She needs consistent, knowledgeable care. Currently, she's receiving excellent care. Changing that would be medically risky. Then Fernando presented new evidence, fire marshal's report that had been completed just days before. The accelerant used in Clara's apartment arson had been traced to a known Desert Reapers associate. The attack was confirmed retaliation against Iron Kings, but police credited the club with cooperation that had helped solve the case. Fernando's argument built carefully. Yes, Mr. Thornton lives in an MC world, but the Iron Kings are law-abiding, cooperative with police, legitimate business owners. They protected Ms. Martinez when she had nowhere else to go. They're a community, a support system, a family that takes care of its own. That's exactly what Lily needs. The surprise witness changed everything. Fernando called Marcus Webb, introduced as Denise's ex-boyfriend. The man was maybe 30, uncomfortable in a suit, clearly not wanting to be there but compelled by subpoena. His testimony was devastating. Denise had left Lily because dealing with a disabled child was too hard and ruined her social life. She had spent 8 months partying, shopping on credit cards, living beyond her means. She only came back when Marcus left her and money ran out. Marcus's voice was flat ashamed. She told me she'd get custody, put Lily in a state facility, collect the disability checks. Said it was passive income that would let her live comfortably without working so hard. I didn't believe her at first. Then I heard her on the phone with her lawyer talking about monthly SSI payments. Denise's face went pale, then flushed. Her lawyer called for recess, huddled with his client in urgent whispered conversation. When they returned, Denise took the stand in her own defense, but the damage was done. Her carefully constructed image of devoted mother had cracked, revealing something uglier underneath. Judge Valdez called a 30-minute recess to review evidence. Clara sat in the hallway with Axe, neither of them speaking, both knowing that the next half hour would determine Lily's future. When they were called back, the judge's expression was stern and unreadable. Her voice carried authority that filled the courtroom. This court's priority is Lily's best interest. Not mother's wishes, not father's rights, but what serves this child. She reviewed evidence methodically. Medical records demonstrated clear superiority of care under father's custody. Testimony from multiple sources confirmed father's dedication. Mother's abandonment was documented fact, regardless of medical explanations offered retroactively. Judge Valdez addressed Denise directly. You abandoned your disabled daughter for 8 months. You missed medical appointments that put her health at risk. The evidence suggests your return is financially motivated rather than driven by genuine maternal concern. Then she turned to Axe. You're a convicted felon. Your associates are questionable. Your lifestyle carries risks. But the evidence shows you're an excellent father who has transformed his life for his daughter's benefit. The gavel came down with finality that made Clara's heart stop. Custody remains with Father Jake Thornton. Supervised visitation granted to Mother Denise Thornton 2 hours weekly at a neutral location pending completion of parenting classes and psychological evaluation. If Mother completes these requirements satisfactorily, custody arrangement can be revisited in 1 year. This hearing is adjourned. Axe collapsed forward, his massive frame shaking with sobs of relief. Clara put her hand on his back, her own eyes streaming tears she had been holding for hours. Fernando gathered papers with satisfaction visible despite his professional demeanor. Denise left without looking at anyone, her lawyer following with briefcase that had not been nearly enough to overcome truth. Outside the courthouse, the MC brothers waited. When Axe emerged with Clara beside him, Viper let out a whoop that echoed off marble walls. Chains pulled them both into crushing hugs. Gunnar actually smiled, his scarred face transforming. Smoke nodded once with approval that needed no words. Maria arrived with Lily, the little girl in her wheelchair, looking confused by all the commotion. Axe knelt beside his daughter, his voice breaking. You're staying with me, princess. You're staying with me forever. Lily's bright eyes moved between her father and Clara, intelligence evident in her gaze. Clara knelt beside them, completing the circle, and felt something fundamental shift. This was her family now. Chosen, fought for, earned through sacrifice and loyalty and courage she had not known she possessed. 2 days later, Clara received an email from the University of New Mexico nursing program. Subject line, background check review required. Her stomach dropped as she read the message requesting a meeting with Dean Margaret Chen regarding concerns raised by her background investigation. The dean's office was austere diplomas covering walls along with photos of Chen receiving various awards. The woman herself was maybe 60, gray hair pulled back severely, expression that suggested she had heard every excuse and believed none of them. Her voice was clipped professional. Ms. Martinez, your background check flagged concerning associations. You're residing at an Iron Kings Motorcycle Club compound. You testified in family court on behalf of their president, a convicted felon. Our program cannot accept students with questionable judgment or potentially dangerous connections. Clara tried to explain about the fire, about Lily, about doing the right thing, but Chen's expression remained unmoved. Perception matters in nursing. Patients need to trust their caregivers. Hospital administrators need to trust their staff. Your association with a criminal organization raises serious questions about your character and decision-making. The ultimatum was delivered with bureaucratic efficiency. If you want to continue in this program, you need to separate yourself from the Iron Kings. Move out of the clubhouse immediately. Limit contact with club members to professional courtesies only. Demonstrate you can maintain appropriate boundaries. Clara felt her world fracturing. I don't have anywhere else to live. The fire destroyed everything. I can't afford first and last month's rent plus deposit. Chen's response was unsympathetic. That's not the university's problem. You have 2 weeks to demonstrate compliance or your acceptance will be revoked. Good afternoon, Ms. Martinez. Clara told Axe that evening, sitting in her guest house while afternoon sun slanted through windows. He listened without interrupting, his face showing pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. His response was immediate. Move out. I'll co-sign a lease, pay the deposit, whatever you need. Don't sacrifice your future for us. Clara wanted to argue but knew he was right. She had fought for Lily in court, had proven her loyalty to this chosen family. Now she needed to fight for her own dreams with equal determination. Where am I supposed to go? I've looked at apartments. Even studios want $3,000 up front. Axe pulled out his checkbook without hesitation. I'll cover it. First, last deposit, furniture, whatever you need. They found a small studio near campus within 3 days. $600 monthly rent, which Clara could barely afford working part-time, but Axe co-signed the lease and paid $1,800 for first, last, and security deposit. The MC brothers helped move her in, carrying donated furniture from various clubhouse residences, a bed from Chain's garage, a couch from Viper's place, kitchen supplies from Maria. Lily cried when Clara explained she was moving out, tears streaming down the little girl's face while her body remained rigid in ways that prevented her from expressing grief physically. Clara knelt beside the wheelchair, her own face wet. Her voice broke. I'm not leaving you, sweetheart. I'm still going to see you all the time. Just not living next door anymore. But moving out felt like betrayal, like choosing career over family, ambition over loyalty. Clara lay awake her first night in the studio, surrounded by secondhand furniture that smelled like other people's lives, and wondered if she had made the right choice. Nursing school started in August with an orientation that made clear how demanding the next 4 years would be. 15 credits of coursework plus labs plus clinical rotations. Study groups, essential peer support, mandatory failure rate approaching 30%. Clara looked around at her classmates, mostly younger, mostly from stable backgrounds, with family support and financial security. She was older, poorer, connected to a criminal organization that Dean Chen was watching for any excuse to expel her. Word spread quickly. The girl who lived with bikers. The one who testified for a felon. Students kept distance, conversations stopping when she approached. Group projects somehow never had space for her. Study sessions were always full when she asked to join. One student confronted her directly in the cafeteria. Why are you even here? Bikers don't become nurses. You're taking a spot from someone who actually belongs. Clara wanted to fight back, wanted to defend herself. Instead, she just walked away, eating lunch alone in her car, crying where nobody could see. Professor Linda Walsh assigned clinical partners for hands-on training. Every student got paired except Clara left working alone because Walsh claimed odd numbers required it. But Clara had counted. There were 24 students, even numbers. Walsh had deliberately excluded her. Her grades suffered without study support. First pathophysiology exam came back with 62%, 8 points below passing. Walsh called her in, suggested maybe nursing was not Clara's calling. Recommended she consider dropping before failing, became official transcript notation. Clara called Axe from her car, breaking down completely. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here. His voice came through firm, despite the phone line. You belong anywhere you decide to belong. Don't let their prejudice define you. Maria offered to tutor Clara 3 nights weekly using her own nursing experience to break down complex material into understandable pieces. They sat in Clara's tiny studio, going over drug interactions and disease processes until Clara could recite information in her sleep. Her grades climbed slowly. 62 became 71, became 83. Clinical rotations, second semester brought new challenges. Clara was assigned to University Hospital Pediatric Ward under supervision of Nurse Rachel, who had reviewed Clara's file with obvious disapproval. Rachel's greeting was cold. Iron King's Motorcycle Club. You're in my unit. Who approved this? She made Clara's rotation hell in small ways that were hard to document but impossible to miss. Worst shifts always overnight or weekends. Hardest patients, the ones who required most skill and patience. Impossible tasks given with tight deadlines designed to ensure failure. Week 3 brought Daniel an 8-year-old boy with cerebral palsy admitted for pneumonia. His mother, Julie, was a single-parent waitress, working double shifts, exhausted in ways Clara recognized from Axe. Daniel was nonverbal, wheelchair-bound, medically complex in ways that intimidated most of the nursing staff. Rachel assigned Daniel to Clara with expression that suggested she was setting a trap. Let's see if your experience is real or just resume padding. But Clara excelled with Daniel in ways that surprised everyone except herself. She knew exactly how to communicate with nonverbal children, how to read their needs through expression and sound. She knew feeding techniques that prevented aspiration positioning strategies that maximize comfort. She taught Julie tricks that made care easier, shared knowledge gained from Sophie and Lily. Daniel responded to Clara better than any other nurse on the floor. His mother specifically requested Clara open for all shifts, which ward policy had to accommodate. Even Rachel had to admit Clara's competence, though approval came grudgingly. Final semester required case study presentations, 30% of clinical grade. Clara chose to present on cerebral palsy care, knowing it risked exposing her MC connections, but unable to hide what mattered most. She compared 2 cases, one anonymous patient receiving excellent home care from dedicated caregiver, one receiving adequate but impersonal institutional care. The anonymous patient was Lily. Clara did not use her name, did not mention the MC, just presented data that spoke for itself. Under devoted care, superior outcomes. Under adequate care, merely satisfactory outcomes. The difference was love patients, seeing the person before the disability. Her presentation concluded with personal statement that felt like ripping her chest open for examination. I've faced prejudice in this program because of my family connections. Students excluded me. Professors questioned my judgment. I was told bikers don't become nurses, that I didn't belong. She paused, making eye contact with Dean Chen in the front row. But those connections taught me more about compassionate care than any textbook. They showed me that good caregivers come from unexpected places, that we must see past stereotypes to recognize excellence, that everyone deserves dignity regardless of their background or who loves them. The auditorium was silent when she finished. Then one student stood and clapped, then another. Then half the room was on their feet applauding, while the other half sat uncomfortable but unable to deny the truth of what they had heard. Dean Chen approached afterward, her stern expression softened slightly. That was exceptional work, Ms. Martinez. I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing your full story. Rachel grudgingly conceded. You earned this grade. Well done. Several students apologized, admitting they had been wrong, but some maintained distance prejudice, too ingrained to overcome with single presentation. Clara accepted partial vindication, understanding she would spend her career proving herself to people who saw her background before her competence. Summer between first and second year brought job offer from Maria's hospital, paid internship in pediatric cerebral palsy clinic, working directly with Dr. Patel. Clara excelled parents requesting her specifically because she understood their children in ways most medical staff never achieved. With less pressure and more support, Clara and Axe finally built the relationship they had been dancing around for 18 months, real dates without crisis driving them. Movies and dinners and long rides through New Mexico desert. Clara no longer feared motorcycles, had overcome trauma through repeated exposure and trust earned over time. Their first kiss came after 8 months of knowing each other under stars at the compound where Clara was visiting Lily. Axe had been afraid to push, afraid his feelings would pressure her into something she did not want. But Clara kissed him first, deciding for herself rather than being decided for. His voice was rough when they finally pulled apart. I've loved you since you fed Lily that first night. Took me this long to deserve you. Clara's response was fierce. You always deserved me. Took me this long to believe I deserved you. She spent more time at the compound, now integrated into the community, as Axe's girlfriend rather than charity case. Other families fully accepted her. She helped plan MC charity events, worked toy drives, and veteran support programs saw firsthand the good these supposedly dangerous men accomplished. Second-year nursing school was easier with support system in place. Clara made top 10% of class considered for scholarship honors. Dean Chen nominated her for the Nightingale Award, recognizing outstanding nursing students. The essay requirement asked about career inspiration. Clara wrote about Lily, about Axe, about found family, and looking past stereotypes. She wrote about her father's death and her initial prejudice in The Journey from Fear to Love. She wrote truth without apology, knowing it might cost her the award, but unwilling to hide what mattered most. She won. $5,000 scholarship in recognition at formal ceremony attended by Axe in borrowed suit Lily in beautiful dress MC brothers, who looked uncomfortable but proud. When Clara gave her acceptance speech, she acknowledged them publicly. Her voice carried across the auditorium. I'm here because a little girl with bright eyes showed me what love looks like. And her father, a man society judged harshly, showed me what dedication means. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. After the ceremony, Denise approached. She had been attending supervised visits with Lily for over a year, completing parenting classes and therapy. Her appearance was less polished now, more genuine, showing vulnerability that her previous perfection had hidden. Her voice was quiet. I was wrong. I was selfish. I abandoned her when she needed me. I'm not trying to take her away anymore. I just want to be part of her life if Axe will let me. Axe considered, discussed it with Clara, and the MC brothers finally agreed to gradual increase in visitation. Lily deserves a mother. If you're serious about changing, prove it. But I'm watching. One mistake, and you're done. Denise proved herself over the following years. Weekly visits became bi-weekly, supervised became unsupervised. She attended Lily's therapy sessions, learned care techniques, showed genuine interest in her daughter's life. The relationship would never be easy, trust too damaged to fully repair. But it existed, which was more than anyone expected. Clara graduated nursing school 4 years after that first night at the diner. Summa cum laude, top 5%, multiple job offers from prestigious hospitals. She chose University Hospital Pediatric Neurology Unit, working with Dr. Patel, specializing in care for children like Sophie and Lily. The Iron Kings filled the front row at graduation. Axe, Lily, now 11, and using a communication device, the MC brothers and their families. Rosa had come from Texas. Reconciliation achieved slowly over years of phone calls, where Clara refused to choose between blood family and chosen family until Rosa finally accepted both. After graduation, Axe took Clara to the desert overlook where they had first kissed. New Mexico's sunset painted the sky in colors that defied description, beauty so vast it hurt to witness. He knelt in dust that had seen millennia of human joy and sorrow. Clara Martinez, you saved my daughter. You saved me. You became our family through choice and sacrifice and courage. I'll never fully understand. Will you make it official? Marry me. The ring was simple silver with small diamond engraved inside with words that mattered more than expensive stones. Family forever. Clara's yes was immediate, emphatic, accompanied by tears that came from happiness rather than grief for the first time in longer than she could remember. The wedding 3 months later was small, held at the compound under vast New Mexico sky. Lily was flower girl Rev, pushing her wheelchair down the aisle while she scattered petals with device-assisted help. Maria stood as maid of honor, Viper as best man. Mix of guests represented Clara's journey, nursing school friends who had apologized sitting beside MC, families who had never doubted. Rosa attended, hugging Clara while crying. Your father would be proud, mija. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner. Clara started her hospital job while simultaneously developing an idea that had been forming for months. She noticed families struggling with care techniques, financial burdens, social isolation. Parents who needed help but did not know where to find it, who felt alone in challenges that were overwhelming. She proposed nonprofit organization to Axe over dinner one evening. Support for parents of disabled kids. Respite care, caregiver training, financial assistance, community building. Everything we wish had existed when you first got Lily. His response was immediate. How do we start? They co-founded Lily's Hope Foundation with mission centered on practical support rather than vague charity. Iron Kings pledged to fundraise through annual motorcycle rally. Maria's hospital network provided resources and referrals. First year helped 12 families with medical bills, equipment, and caregiver training that transformed care quality. The inaugural Lily's Hope motorcycle rally brought 200 bikers from multiple clubs through Albuquerque. Route ended at Iron King's compound for barbecue, live music, silent auction. Raised $80,000, exceeding every projection. Local news covered the story Biker Gang, helping disabled kids narrative that challenged stereotypes and opened doors. Clara was interviewed wearing both her nurse scrubs and Lily's Hope t-shirt. We're proof that family comes in all forms, that community has no stereotypes, that everyone deserves support regardless of who loves them or where they come from. 5 years after that first night at the diner, Clara stood in the same building for lunch. She was 28 now, director of Lily's Hope Foundation, while maintaining part-time nursing position. The organization had helped over 100 families change lives through practical support and genuine community. A new waitress worked the floor, maybe 19, nervous energy evident in her movements. She approached Clara's table with hesitation. Her voice was uncertain. Table 7 looked scary. Big bikers with patches. Should I refuse to serve them? Clara looked toward the booth and saw a young man in Iron King's vest, clearly new member based on provisional patch placement. He had a toddler in specialized wheelchair beside him, expensive equipment that suggested complex medical needs. The man's face showed exhaustion, Clara recognized instantly. First-time father, overwhelmed by responsibility and fear. Her response was gentle. Go serve them. Be kind. You never know who you'll meet or how a moment of compassion might change everything. She watched the waitress approach, nervously saw the young father's gratitude when she offered to help feed his child. Watched the cycle continue, kindness rippling forward in ways nobody could predict or control. Clara left a $50 tip on a $12 lunch and walked out knowing her father would be proud of the woman she had become. The National Nursing Association honored Clara with their humanitarian award 2 years later. Recognition for Lily's Hope's impact. 500 families helped over 7 years, programs expanding to 4 states. Acceptance speech at National Convention drew 2,000 nurses, hospital administrators, healthcare leaders. Clara brought Lily on stage, now 16, and using speech-generating device that gave voice to thoughts she had always possessed but never been able to share. The device spoke Lily's program message. Clara fed me chicken tenders 12 years ago. Changed my life. Changed my dad's life. Changed hundreds of families. All because she was kind when she was scared. That's real courage. After the ceremony, media wanted interviews and photos. But Clara looked past the cameras to the back of the ballroom where Axe stood with his MC brothers. All of them grayer, older, prouder. Viper and Chains and Gunner and Smoke and Rev, the family that had shown up when nobody else would. Axe mouthed across the distance. You did it, Clara mouthed back. We did it. The official photos showed found families surrounding National Award. Clara and Axe and Lily and Sophie, who had joined the foundation staff. The MC brothers in suits looking uncomfortable but beaming. Maria and other volunteers who made everything possible. All wearing motorcycle wing pins that symbolize flying together. All proof that kindness mattered more than prejudice. That courage looked like opening doors when it would be easier to keep them locked. That family was who showed up and stayed and fought beside you through every impossible challenge. Clara thought about the terrified waitress. She had been afraid of bikers and grief and a future that felt impossible. Thought about the woman she had become through sacrifice and love and choosing courage over fear repeatedly until it became habit rather than exception. The foundation's tagline was printed on everything they produced. Because everyone deserves to be seen. Because family is who shows up. Because one moment of kindness can change the world. Clara had opened a door on a cold evening 12 years ago. Had fed a little girl because it was right, not because it was safe. Had chosen compassion over prejudice and loyalty over reputation and love over fear. And that single choice had rippled forward into a life she could never have imagined, a family she would not trade for anything, and a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. The desert sun set over New Mexico in colors that defied capture, vast and beautiful and full of possibility. Clara stood with Axe's hand in hers and Lily's chair beside them, and her chosen family surrounding them, and felt gratitude so profound it bordered on prayer. They had survived everything. Fire and prejudice and legal battles and social judgment. They had built something real from circumstances that should have destroyed them. They had proven that reformation was possible, that second chances mattered, that love conquered fear when given the opportunity. And somewhere in that diner on Route 66, another waitress was learning the same lesson Clara had learned, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open a door, that sometimes the scariest people become your family, that sometimes one act of kindness creates ripples that transform the world in ways you will never fully see, but will always matter. The story was not over. It would continue through every family. Lily's hope helped every nurse Clara trained, every person who chose compassion over fear. The work would go on because it had to, because people still needed help and families still struggled and children still deserved to be seen as more than their disabilities. But tonight, Clara allowed herself to rest in the knowledge that she had done enough, that she was enough, that the terrified girl who had once feared motorcycles had become the woman who rode them fearlessly, who had built a life and a family and a legacy from nothing but courage and love, and the refusal to accept that fear should win. The stars came out over New Mexico, infinite and eternal and witnessing. Clara squeezed Axe's hand, smiled at Lily, and walked forward into whatever came next with the certainty that she would never face it alone. Family was forever, courage was choosing love, and sometimes the best thing you could ever do was open a door when everyone told you to keep it locked.